My son handed me a $10,000 check. He thought he'd just stolen $5 million from me. But I already knew everything. I'm Emma, 65 years old. For 38 years, I watched Robert grow from a curious boy into what I believed was a responsible man. 20 acres worth $5 million. Robert knew exactly what he was stealing. 3 weeks before that check appeared in my mailbox, Alice knocked on my door at 9 in the evening. My daughter-in-law looked pale. Her hands shook as she clutched a manila folder against her chest. She told me she'd overheard Robert on the phone. He was talking about fake signatures and a quick sale. The conversation she described made my blood run cold. My own son was planning to steal my land and disappear to Los Angeles with another woman. Alice's voice barely held together as she explained everything. Robert had been meeting this woman for months. He promised her a new life funded by what he called his future money. The nerve of it shocked me. He wasn't just stealing my property. He was destroying his marriage and abandoning his family for someone who probably didn't even know the money was stolen. I sat in my kitchen that night staring at the folder Alice left behind. Inside were photos of text messages, printed emails, even a hotel receipt. The evidence was overwhelming. My son had been planning this betrayal for months. I wasn't angry. I was awake. The next morning, I called Claire. She'd been my friend since college and handled my late husband's legal matters. When I explained what Alice had discovered, Claire's response was swift. She told me we needed to act immediately before Robert could complete the sale. We drove to the county recorder's office that same day. What we found there made my stomach turn. Robert had already filed papers using what looked like my signature. The handwriting was close, but not perfect. He'd practiced, but not enough. Claire ordered a handwriting analysis right away. The results confirmed what we suspected. The signature was fake. My son had gambled that no one would check carefully enough to notice. He was wrong. Claire filed an emergency order to stop the sale. The buyer was legitimate and had no idea they were dealing with stolen documents. When Claire contacted them with proof of the fake signature, they backed out immediately. While we waited for the legal process to unfold, I discovered more disturbing details. Robert hadn't just planned to steal my land. He'd already spent money he didn't have. Gambling debts, credit card bills, loans from people who weren't patient about getting paid back. The woman in Los Angeles wasn't just his escape plan. She was his only remaining option after he'd burned through every other possibility. He'd promised her a life of luxury funded by my property. Photos on his phone showed the house they'd picked out, the trips they'd planned, even the car they wanted to buy. If the papers said I agreed, the ink would have to answer for it. When Robert finally appeared at my door with that $10,000 check, his face showed no shame. He spoke about fresh starts and new opportunities, as if he were doing me a favor by letting me keep pocket change from my own money. His casual tone suggested he believed his plan had worked perfectly. I looked at him and saw a stranger wearing my son's face. This man had spent weeks planning my financial ruin. He'd practiced copying my signature. He'd lied to his wife and prepared to abandon his family. The boy, who used to bring me dandelions and call them roses, had grown into someone I didn't recognize. The envelope Alice gave me contained more than just evidence. Inside were also photos she'd taken of Robert's phone, text messages between him and the Los Angeles woman. The messages revealed not just their affair, but detailed discussions about how they'd spend the money from my property. They'd already picked out a house, planned trips to Europe, even discussed buying a boat. My life's work had become their shopping list. Reading those messages, I felt something shift inside me. The motherly instinct to protect and forgive was replaced by something harder, something more determined. Robert had made his choice. Now I would make mine. The following Tuesday, Claire and I met with Robert at her office. When he walked in expecting to discuss some minor legal matter, his face went white. Claire presented him with copies of the fake documents, the court order, and the criminal complaint we'd filed. The silence stretched for almost a minute before Robert found his voice. He tried to explain, to justify, to minimize what he'd done, but every word only made his situation worse. Claire calmly explained that forgery and attempted real estate fraud were serious crimes. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Robert's lawyer advised him to cooperate. The prosecutor was willing to consider a plea deal if he made full confession and agreed to pay back everything he'd tried to steal. Not just the money, but the legal costs, the emotional damage, the broken trust. Mercy isn't a discount. It's a contract with consequences. Instead of fighting the charges, Robert broke down completely. The gambling addiction, the debt, the affair, everything poured out in a confession that lasted over an hour. The judge listened with visible concern as Robert described how his life had spiraled out of control. But concern didn't equal leniency. Robert received 18 months of supervised monitoring, community service, and mandatory counseling for gambling addiction. More importantly, he had to make full payback, not just to me, but to Alice for the emotional damage his betrayal had caused. That was the court's part. Separately, I hired him on my land at basic wages to earn back trust. The real punishment, though, was what I imposed myself. I offered Robert a choice. He could accept the consequences of his actions and work to rebuild our relationship, or he could leave and never contact our family again. If he chose to stay, he would work on my property. Not as my son, but as an employee, earning basic wages while I decided whether he deserved forgiveness. To my surprise, Robert chose to stay. For the next 12 months, I watched him arrive every morning at 7, ready to do whatever work I assigned. Some days he cleared brush. Other days he repaired fences or painted buildings. The work was hard, humbling, and exactly what he needed. During those months, I began pursuing the dream Robert's betrayal had nearly stolen from me. Later that week, I posted a small note on the community board: "Volunteers welcome, patience required." A few hands showed up, then a few more. The place didn't brag, it breathed, and in that breathing, I felt my boundaries knit themselves back together. The property had always been intended for something special, a children's home where kids aging out of foster care could learn life skills and find stability. With help from an old friend who invested in the project, we broke ground on the facility. Right when the work felt steady, a small test found us. I thought we'd overcome everything. Then Alice called me at midnight. She worried about a second phone in Robert's car. In the morning, Robert placed it on my desk. He had kept it as evidence, messages from a former partner who tried to buy our records. He refused, saved the texts, and asked how to report it. We alerted our counsel, changed the codes, and trained the staff. The home stayed open, the kids safe, and my trust grew, not blind, but earned. Watching Robert work alongside the construction crew was revealing. Seeing him slowly rebuild trust with Alice showed me glimpses of the son I'd raised. He attended every counseling session, paid every debt, slowly earned back the respect he'd thrown away. The children's home took shape month by month. Robert worked on every part of it, digging foundations, installing drywall, painting walls. The physical labor seemed to heal something in him that words couldn't reach. Alice visited the construction site regularly. At first, she barely spoke to Robert, but gradually I watched them have longer conversations, saw them working side by side on smaller projects. Their marriage was healing too, one careful day at a time. Quiet justice doesn't gloat. It opens its doors. The children's home opened exactly 1 year after Robert's arrest. At the dedication ceremony, I stood before a crowd of supporters and spoke about second chances, about the power of real accountability. Robert was there, still on probation but present as my son, not my employee. In my closing remarks, I looked directly at him. I said that sometimes the people we love most are the ones who hurt us deepest, but that pain doesn't have to be permanent if genuine change follows genuine remorse. After the ceremony, guests mingled, and children from the first group of residents explored their new home. Robert approached me with something in his hand, not a check this time, but a letter written in his own words, an apology that acknowledged not just what he'd done, but who he'd become and how much work it had taken to find his way back. The letter also contained a proposal for moving forward, a plan for Robert to oversee the daily operations of the children's home, using his business skills for something meaningful instead of destructive. Alice stood beside him as he made this offer. Her presence signaled that their marriage had also survived his betrayal. The three of us talked for over an hour about the future, about trust, about the careful way relationships heal when both parties commit to the process. As the evening wound down and the last guest departed, I walked through the completed children's home with Robert and Alice. The facility exceeded every vision I'd had during those long years of planning. Seeing it full of young people who needed exactly what we were offering felt like healing, not just for Robert, but for our entire family. Standing in the main common room, watching teenage residents already making themselves at home, I felt satisfaction that had nothing to do with revenge, everything to do with purpose fulfilled. Robert's attempt to steal my property had ultimately led to its highest use. The children's home has been operating successfully for 6 months now. Robert has proven himself capable of leadership and genuine care for our residents. Alice has returned to full partnership in their marriage. Our family dinners have resumed with something approaching normal. Yet every few weeks, I still receive detailed financial reports from Claire. I still maintain separate oversight of all major decisions, still keep certain legal protections in place. Some might call this excessive caution. I call it wisdom earned through experience. But even as I celebrate this victory, I can't completely ignore the small voice in my mind, the one that reminds me that trust, once broken, never fully returns to its original shape. It becomes something different, something that requires ongoing proof rather than blind faith. Last week, Robert handed me the quarterly report for the children's home. Our first group of residents are thriving. 3 have found jobs. 2 are enrolled in community college. 1 is planning to become a social worker herself. As I reviewed the numbers, I noticed something that made me pause. Robert had included a section I hadn't requested, a detailed breakdown of his own salary and benefits. Complete transparency, offered without being asked. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes about how much he'd learned, about how trust gets rebuilt, not through grand promises, but through consistent, accountable actions over time. I didn't win a fight. I rebuilt a boundary. What was taken returned in a plainer shape. Work, meals, names remembered, doors that stay locked. Would you trust completely again, or would you always keep one eye on the books?